Well, good afternoon. I am Teresa Cordova, Director of UIC's Great Cities Institute. We are honored to be co-sponsoring this event with others at UIC, including the Institute for the Humanities, the Anthropocene Lab within the Institute for the Humanities, the Institute for Research on Race and Public Policy, and Gender and Women's Studies. Dr. Alan McClure is here with us today. Thank you so much, Dr. McClure, along with Katie Corboy, also from the Institute for Humanities. Thank you both. She's Assistant Director. And also Rachel Haverlock, who's a part of the Anthropocene Lab and is also the Director of the Freshwater Lab. Beat Miesler, who is with the Anthropocene Lab. And who else am I missing from the Anthropocene Lab? Should I get you all from the Oh, yeah, and then Amor, that's what I thought. I was just going to say, Amor Hamaranch, right? I want to make sure. Say it right, so I got it. Hamansha. Thank you. Harmansha, just the way it's spelled. There you go. And as always, I want to thank the Great Cities Institute staff for their work on this event. Finally, I want to thank everyone for being here today. We appreciate your time. We have been very excited about this moment and so happy that you are part of it. I have known Jane for 33 1/3 years, an old album. So I am thrilled to share her all with all of you. Professor Jane Caputi is Professor of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Florida Atlantic University. She is here to share her analysis of Mother Earth meets the Anthropocene, which we refer to as the Age of Man, an ecofeminist environmental justice assessment. Jane is a brilliant scholar and has been writing about the symbols, myths, and the importance of elevating the power of women, particularly in the face of destructive forces such as nuclear power, warfare, and extractive industries. She insightfully juxtaposes the pervasive symbols and actual violence against women with patriarchal power that breeds the destruction of sources of life, Mother Earth herself. Yet her message is one of hope and optimism. In her work, she has revived mythical powers of women. By lifting feminine spiritual powers, we can change our relationship to nature and restore balance to our culture. Her most recent book, Call Your Mother, a deliberately dirty-minded manifesto for the Earth Mother in the Anthropocene, was published by Oxford University Press in 2020. Jane makes a very powerful argument for the significance of Mother Earth in the face of the destructive forces of domination over nature and the threats to survival. Dr. Caputi's other books, including Goddesses and Monsters, Women, Myth, Power, and Popular Culture, was published by Popular Press in 2004. Gossips, Gorgons, and Crones, The Fates of the Earth, which is one of my very favorites, published Bear and Company 1993, and Age of the Sex Crime, Popular Press 1987. She has also made 2 educational documentaries, The Pornography of Everyday Life, distributed by Berkeley Media, and Feed the Green, Feminist Voices for the Earth, 2016, distributed by Women Make Moves. Dr. Caputi, in 2016, was named Eminent Scholar of the Year by the American Popular Culture Association, and in 2020, the Association for the Study of Women in Mythology gave her their annual Saga Award for contributions to women's history and culture. In a 1993 Jeffrey Mishlove interview with Jane Caputi, he ended by saying to Jane, thank you for being here. Your mind is deep, flexible, and joyful. Indeed it is. Professor Jane Caputi, we welcome you to the University of Illinois, Chicago.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cordova, and everybody here and everybody who helped bring me here. I'm very grateful, and we had a great time with Dr. Cordova's class yesterday, and I'm very happy about that too. Okay, I'd like to stand here, not behind the podium. Can you hear me? Is the microphone picking it up enough? Okay, great. I'll start with the land acknowledgement, for me, in Boca Raton, Florida, the homeland of the Tequesa and Seminole nations who were warred against and removed to Oklahoma. Many escaped and became the basis of the groups in Florida today. But I was just Googling around and realized that there's also labor acknowledgements, right, to like chattel slavery, the enslaved and then underpaid, exploited, and abused labor that has continued to make this country great. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers, founders of the Fair Food Program, spoke in my class the other day. And of course, women work for free all the time, right? The greatest unpaid labor force, which is also true of the being we think of as Mother Nature, like those sexist stereotypes are projected onto nature, who is supposed to just provide everything we need for life and get nothing back in return, really, right? So we'll go on from there. This is my book, an advisory. There is some obscene language and obscene images, hate imagery, references to rape and other forms of sexual violence. And for sale, yeah. All right. I just want to have some recognition of the significance of Mother Earth in the traditions of ecofeminism, environmental justice, and just even going back to the first people of, the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in 1991, in which the principles of environmental justice were first laid out. And the very first principle, of course, affirms the sacredness of Mother Earth, ecological unity, and the interdependence of all species, the right to be free from ecological destruction. And I know you had some of these founders here. So who is Mother Earth, Mother Nature, right? It's really the oldest idea. Some say idea, but really I would say awareness or recognition. And it's found really all over the globe, not absolutely universally, but really mostly all over the globe, and pretty much associated today with Indigenous traditions, but really almost any tradition, including the European tradition, which of course I represent, also has this whole understanding of Mother Earth or nature. And the basic idea is Earth is alive. Earth is a being. Earth is whole, the essential source and force of life, death, a mother or grandmother upon whom we utterly depend, as much as a fetus in the womb, right? You've seen movies like Gravity, right? When she's cut off from the earth, there's no life, right? There's no possibility of life without Earth. We utterly do, and whom we have obligations. The sacredness of Mother Earth means we have obligations to respect, to honor Earth limits, and to return gifts, material and energetic. Energetic return of gifts could be prayer for some people. It could be some understanding of reciprocity of attention. This recognition of Mother Earth as alive, as a mother or grandmother on whom we depend, historically has provided a restraint against the limitless exploitation of nature. And this is Kenozhuak Ashevik, whose sculpture of Mother Nature shows sort of the interdependence of all life. Frida Kahlo, just to remind us that this idea of Mother Nature is out there in the art world as well as in popular culture, the loving embrace of the universe, the earth. Myself, Diego, and Senor Xolotl, her dog. Mother Nature, of course, though, with this ancient religious, scientific, and philosophical awareness, has been reduced in modern Western rationalism to just folklore, trivialized, right? Oh, that's just a myth. And you get these kind of representations, very disrespectful. This is a violation of the sacred, right? That first principle of environmental justice, to show this kind of after Hurricane Sandy in New York, yo, Mother Nature, take a chill, you bitch. And of course, when she's destructive, she's shown as an old woman, right? Sort of in that ageism comes in, that she's despised as this old woman, Maggie Smith. But that ad for Tampax, I mean, look at Mother Nature in a frumpy little outfit holding the red gift box, which is menstruation, right? And we're told, cut Mother Nature down to size. The tampon is bigger than Mother Nature in this series of ads from 2012. Right, this is the source of life, right? If we refuse the gift, every day we should be thanking Mother Nature for the gifts of life, right? Water, clean water, air, land, food. Instead, we're being told you can reject it. And this plastic tampon, right, creating microplastics into the ocean right now, is seen as actually better and bigger than Mother Nature Earth. I mean, it really is astonishing, right? I mean, something so trite as a Tampax ad carries such ideological message. And Mother Nature is not a myth. Mother Nature is not just some colorful figure of folklore. Throughout, especially indigenous traditions, you will see Earth is our mother. And this is not a metaphor. It is real, says Leroy Littlebear. I could give you endless of showing of scholars and activists who state this. Here's another. Land is our mother. This is not a metaphor. You came from a place. You grew in a place. You had a relationship with place. This is an epistemological idea. One does not simply learn about land. We learn best from land. How about that for reversing what is considered to be the contentional? Oh, we study, we objectify, we look at land, right? No, the land is the teacher, right, in this. So there's so much reversal about what we're taught as a conventional way of perceiving the world. Here's Vanessa Gray, an activist, and she says, the land is our mother, so when we lose value for the land, people lose value for the women. And she's talking not just, she's talking about also this genocide, the continuing genocide of the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women that so often takes place around extractive sites, right? And if you really want to learn about that, please go to this website and read this. Well, here it is. I'll get to it. But Patsy Cook also interviewed in the same Violence on the Land, Violence on Our Bodies, available for free online. Woman is the first environment. In pregnancy, our bodies sustain life. At the breast of women, the generations are nourished. From the bodies of women flows the relationship of those generations, both to society and the natural world. In this way, the earth is our mother, the old people said. In this way, we as women are earth. There's an unviable connection between the health of our bodies, all of our bodies, however we're classified in terms of sex and gender. We really all are Mother Earth, really. We are an interdependent entity that is the earth. Violence that happens on the land is intimately connected to the violence that happens to our bodies. And this is what I'm talking about, this piece that you can all go look at. And I'm quoting a lot because I think it's so important. Because it's also important to recognize that this is not just, when we talk about Mother Earth, we're not just engaging in typical hetero-sexist, hetero-patriarchal sex and gender binaries. As this same text says, connecting with the land, defending the land, should not reinforce violent binaries in which certain people are left out of communities. Within land-based work, we must remember there are more than two genders, female and male, that exist on the land. Otherwise, we exclude two-spirit, gender non-conforming, and non-binary people. So the land is teaching us that the gender binary, as we know it, is false, right? Scientists have covered that up for a long time, but it's true. The land is not necessarily in this binary. Land in Indigenous expression means everything, not just the ground, but like the air, the water, the sky, and all of us. We are land. Dr. Alex Wilson says, that yes, many talk of Mother Earth, but in Cree, the land is not gendered. What is important is a kinship relationship to the land. So recognizing the land is your family, the land, all of Earth is part of a family. That's the important connection, the kinship connection. Linda Tuawi Smith in Decolonizing Methodologies, she also is this whole idea of Mother Earth as this misty, romanticized idea is nonsense. She talks about the Earth parent as really a scientific idea that allows people to figure out how to survive because you're recognizing interdependence and the necessity of reciprocity, and you're learning from the land. So we had to know about Mother Earth in order to do all these things. We still have to know about Mother Earth to do these things, or the Earth parent, she says, because we have to know how life really works. And of course, there's the rights of Mother Earth. The International Movement for Mother Earth Rights defines Mother Earth as an indivisible living community of interrelated and interdependent beings. That's all of us and everything else with a common destiny. But here we are. Mother Earth meets the Anthropocene, right? On the left is Fabiana Rodriguez's. She created this poster for the 2014 People's Climate March in New York City. I was in New York City, and there's the poster, right? I was there for the march. And she describes the woman is not meant to represent Mother Earth. She is meant to represent just an ordinary woman, a fierce mama, standing up for our mother, Pachamama, which is an Andean name for the Earth Mother, and defending her home and family. That in the Anthropocene, it's absolutely necessary to defend Mother Earth. And here's geology, GSA Today. Are we now living in the Anthropocene? What do you think about that symbol for the Anthropocene? It's a phallic symbol, right? It's a symbol of masculinist elevation over the earth and domination. It's a symbol of masculine domination over the feminine earth, I would say. The Anthropocene, National Geographic tells us, is the name for a new geological... Oh, no, this is Paul Crutzen and William Steffen. It's the name for a new geological era marked by human having become a global geophysical force capable of overwhelming the great forces of nature. Really? We're overwhelming the great forces of nature? It's really nonsense, right? But we're so used to that kind of rhetoric in Western civilization speak. Man as the master of nature, et cetera, et cetera. And that's Paul Crutzen over there. And again, this is the city of Dubai. Again, that giant tower symbolizing the Anthropocene. This was a radio show in a single lifetime. This is from the voiceover. We have grown, and that was the image for this radio show. We've grown into a phenomenal global force. We move more sediment and rock annually than all natural processes, such as erosion of rivers. We are altering the Earth's natural order. This is supposed to be a good thing. We have entered the Anthropocene. And as Gabrielle Hecht, a history professor at Stanford, writes, who actually moved that rock, right? Do you think the guys who were writing that actually moved that rock? No, absolutely not, right? How did this movement affect, here's the environmental justice piece, affect the people and ecosystem around those mines, and not just at the time of extraction, but decades later, right? So the kind of deception that's built into this language, this glorification of the Anthropocene, and humans as doing these wondrous superhero-like things of moving rock, etc. Sylvia Wynter helps us understand, the decolonial theorist, who is man, right, in the age of man. And she says that she uses man to signify the ways that the human in Western discourse is used as a mask for a ruling ethnoclass, typically Western, white, male, masculinist, straight, conventionally abled, affluent, educated, and socially powerful. Man not only claims the mantle of civilization as the great civilizer of the world, but overrepresents itself as if it were the human itself, right? And we see this historically, that oppressed and marginalized people, including up to our current elections, right, are named as inferior because they are passed as nature, animals, savages, freaks, and monsters. And, rather than go over all of these, I think you get the idea of who is cast as in some way an aspect of nature. And Catherine McKinnon says, are women even human if you look at how women are treated around the world? But I also, as a scholar of popular culture, look at all these representations and how women are so frequently partialized, made to seem as if they're animals, made to seem as if machines, animals in a degraded species kind of way. So, the age of man really is not about all humans. And again, as Paul Crutzen, now writing with Christian Schwerel, says, a long-held religious and philosophical idea, humans as the masters of planet Earth, has turned into a stark reality. He's the atmospheric Nobel Prize-winning chemist who really popularized the notion of the Anthropocene, Paul Crutzen, has turned into a stark reality. It's no longer us against nature. It's we who decide what nature is and what it will be. Really? Climate change? It doesn't really make any sense. It's absurd on the surface, isn't it? And what I find is so interesting, look at this cover of The Economist. The Earth is completely being remade, right? See the lattice work underneath? They're just taking parts out of it as if you could do that, as if the Earth is a toy that they can rebuild every way, or that the Earth is like a woman. Would you be subject to all this cosmetic surgery? This is the ad for a cosmetic surgery clinic in Miami. We can rebuild her, right? So often you see these parallels in the understanding of women in a sexist society as objects or as inferior in ways. Then you see those same kinds of stereotypes and projections on the earth. Man, as I put in, slave master of Mother Earth, is not reality. And it is a religious, philosophical idea, but it's also, frankly, a pornographic one, right? It's a fantasy of sexual and gender domination, as our popular culture absolutely recognized. This is porn film from the 1980s. Some of you are too young to remember the MX missile, a 9-nuclear warhead missile. And here we have Mr. MX. He has 16.5-inch long penis. What about the penis is like a nuclear warhead? Except for maybe a serial sex killer, right? I mean, the penis is more often soft than hard, far more flower than tower, right? Far more fertilizer than weapon, right? But phallic culture erases all that. So then we had Scott Truitt effing the earth. Myers that, of course, got the nuclear arms race since really one. Who's got the bigger one? Dr. Strangelove is the classic. General Jack D. Ripper is the madman who blows up the world. Jack the Ripper, of course, the sexual serial killer in London in 1888. And David Levy showing Henry Kissinger screwing the world. We all know this. Nobody has to explain these jokes, right? We do know that this violation of nature is at root a sexual violation, a deeply gendered violation. Although that's not admitted into the sort of usual literature about this, right? Including into Anthropocene discourse. But popular culture, and we all know it. The activists know this. Tracy Chapman sings of the rape of the world, rape of Mother Earth. Fracking injects toxins into Mother Earth. Stop the mother fracking, right? No permission asked, no permission given. Fracking equals rape. You see this kind of rhetoric in activist discourse a lot. And maybe a lot of us saw Tracy Chapman at the Grammy Awards singing, but I really hope you'll go listen to this song too, right? It is it is probably the most powerful song I've ever heard. Mother of us all, place of our birth, how can we stand aside and watch the rape of the world? This is the beginning of the end. This is the most heinous of crimes, right? Violation of the sacredness of Mother Earth. The greatest violation of all time. Mother of us all, place of our birth, we are all witness to the rape of the world. And at the end, she calls upon all of us to testify to this and stand up against it. 1995. Some say, why are you talking about the rape of the world? That's like an inappropriate metaphor. It's not really accurate, especially often among some environmentalists. But Sarah Deer, who's a MacArthur Award-winning Tuskegee law professor and writing with Elizabeth Ann Prunk, really explained that it is really rape of the world. Mother Earth is not a metaphor, and many tribal cultures understand the unchecked exploitation of the earth to be a violent attack on the land, which carries feminine qualities. So this mistreatment of Mother Earth not only carries important gendered consequences like the violence against women and two-spirit and queer youth that surrounds extractive sites, which has been well documented, but it's a particularly salient relevance in the unique context of Native communities who are seeking to protect their land and water. Carolyn Merchant, the great historian in The Death of Nature, reminds us that the European tradition had millennia of understanding Mother Earth, and that this acted as a constraint against the worst forms of, rapacious use and abuse of the land. Because if the Earth is alive in an organic worldview that prevailed until the scientific revolution, as she says, one does not readily slay a mother, unless, of course, you are a serial sex killer or something like that, right? Which is certainly fantasized enough in our culture, slaying of the mother, psycho on. You dig into her entrails for gold or mutilate her body. As long as the earth was conceptualized, I would say recognized, as alive and sensitive, it can be considered a breach of human ethical behavior. But everything changed in the scientific revolution, where Francis Bacon and others really had it, they outlined this bold imagery from the scientific method, which was constraint of nature in the laboratory, dissection of nature, penetration of nature's hidden secrets. Language all still used, she says, praising the scientist's hard facts, penetrating mind, et cetera, et cetera. And we see this penetrating the secrets of nature and all this kind of rhetoric over. This is basically, as Carolyn Merchant said, this turns into sanctions for exploiting and raping nature for supposed human good. So this really began in Western Europe, she says, and really extending to the whole sort of Western rationalist scientific worldview in around the turn of the early modern age. I would say this is also a religious idea. The father god of patriarchal religions is a deity made in the image of alienated masculinist consciousness. Men have to become men by separating from the feminine, separating from the mother, in psychoanalytic terms, but also in terms of separating from what is seen as the earth, or their carnality. They want to become AI, abstract kind of machine kind of things, better than being a creature of the land, right? And And so Father God created Mother Earth. So you get this external heavenly Father God. And so matter is no longer holy, only what's up in the sky is. And this is a 13th century image of God out there, of course, creating the earth and sort of using this compass, a navigational tool, a measuring tool on the earth. And I see that replicated in this 16th century French conquistador, using that again, towering over the globe and saying, with the sword and the compass, mas and mas and mas and mas, let's just go extract, take as much as possible. Anthropocene man actually mythologizes, this is the mythology, he mythologizes himself as God, right? The God species, right? Nature no longer runs the earth, we do. It's our choice. I mean, again, this is the fantasy. And you see this reflected in popular culture all the time, often with images of men towering over the earth, blowing up the earth, strangling the earth, etc. So what? I said, WTF, right? What's going on here? And so here's Andre 3000 in Vibrate, from Outcast saying, and when I say, can I say the word? Say the word. When I say motherfucker, I do mean motherfucker, because Mother Earth is dying and we continue to fuck her to death, right? So thank you, Andre. Philosophizing, theorizing, right? Through hip hop. Absolutely. Putting back into that this is a gendered sexual violation that is happening right now. Let's break down the word, right? Mother, Oxford English Dictionary, the source of everything, the earth regarded as the source. And the F word, has many definitions, but the first to engage in heterosexual intercourse, that's been corrected in subsequent editions. This was the first edition to mean other kinds of sexual intercourse, not just heterosexual. But look at the second definition, and again, we know this is true. To harm irreparably, to finish, to victimize. What is it about our culture that so conflates sex and violence, right? That the same word that supposedly means I have, intercourse with you or I make love to you even, can also mean to finish you off, to do you in, to ruin you, to victimize you. And I think that says something about the nature of a heteropatriarchal society where sexuality is expressed as a kind of violent domination. Heterosexuality is even idealized as masculine violation or domination of the feminine. And it's all contained in that obscenity. Where did the word come from? There's a great book, Articulate While Black, by Geneva Smitherman and Samuel Leem. And according to Black folk etymology, most linguists won't really agree to this, but it really makes a great deal of sense. According to Black folk etymology, motherfucker was invented by enslaved Africans in the United States as the vilest name possible for the white man, who regularly raped enslaved women and fathered and then enslaved those children, right? Master was not a father in any kind of good sense. He was the motherfucker. So that's where the word comes from, according to Black folk etymology. And it's not just, this is not just like that confined to that, but that action of enslaving the Black woman, forcing her not only to produce, but to reproduce, and then enslaving the children is actually what makes America great. I mean, wealthy, right? For some, and then it is continued. Dolores Williams says, professor of theology at the Theological Union in New York City, retired. Put simply, the assault upon the natural environment today is but an extension of that assault upon Black women's bodies in the 19th century. She says, like strip mining, it's like you exhaust the land, you extract everything you possibly can for the land. This was the model laid down by the extraction perpetrated on Black women's bodies in slavery. Here's Nona Faustine in art. She went and stood on a box to represent like a slave auction box in Wall Street. Wall Street was originally a slave market. And she says, in there, in the heart of Wall Street, from her body, she poses naked to represent all those enslaved and exploited women. From her body sprang their greatest wealth, which is true. And her body is also the body, certainly invokes the body of the earth. Earth-invasive acts like drilling, nuking, fracking, plowing are all synonyms for fucking. Again, asking us to look at the deep ways, that violence has been so infused into sexuality in a heteropatriarchal culture. As Lindsay Nixon and Amanda Lickers say, terra nullius, the doctrine justifying colonization as that this is land owned by no one, or if there's people there, they're savages and they're not capable of having a government. They say terra nullius, drilling, the whole idea of terra nullius leading to this extractive culture is rape culture. This is just a t-shirt that I found for sale, fossil fuel, fuck nature. So I would say that we need the word motherfucking to describe the forced entry into harm, domination, possession, spirit-breaking exploitation, extracted, and wasting of another for reasons of power, pleasure, plunder, and profit. Motherfucking aims to turn the source into a resource. The Anthropocene is the age of the motherfucker, I would say, not the age of the human. Why do I, as a white woman, call upon Black English, right? I put mother in the title of my book in quotes because it's not my word. I am quoting the genius of Black English that recognizes in one word all this kind of understanding of this sexualized, racialized, gendered domination that has led us to the ecological crisis that we are in today. Why is the motherfucker, or is that word better than common discourse like environmental damage or even ecocide? Both of these terms leave out the gender and sexual part of it, right? And they're also kind of like somebody called them bloodless, the environment. I can't remember her name. It's in a book. I'll remember. She said it's a bloodless word. You're not seeing the damage when you do. Environment is out there, right? It's, again, that human separation from nature. And poet and essayist June Jordan says, white English, like a word like environmental damage, makes it easier to lie and neutralize emotion, to display power, to control and eliminate powerless. Black English, she says, is the carrier of Black survivor consciousness and spirit. And I think that's true in the word motherfucker as well. And white English is just going to lie about it. It's not going to allow us to get to the heart of the meaning. I found out when I started researching that actually James Brown was maybe the first one to call the earth mother in his 1977 album, Mother's Nature. Yes. Yeah. And he sings the Gershwin song, Summertime. He prefaces it as what's happening now is going to destroy the seasons, destroy the earth. So he's really making a real environmental message in this. So I would say, and so motherfucker, it's not just about, so we see with James Brown, the mother can now be a good word. It's not just the vilest name you can call somebody possible. Around, all living words, motherfucker evolved and took on new meanings. So by the 20th century, motherfucker started to mean a formidable and inexorable force, right? In a positive way. And I would say that is a way of naming really the earth nature, that force source that brings all into being. This mother power is strategically unnamed in standard white English because the earth mother is the power capable of carrying out the mother's curse, right? The curse that is laid on you when you violate the sacredness of Mother's Earth, directed at those who, the mother is the one who can overwhelm man in that sense of institutionalized white and male supremacy. I only recognize a lot of this after reading L.H. Stallings in her book, Mother is Half a Word. And she's really writing about hip-hop female artists and how they use the word mother and motherfucker to really rename and reclaim radical Black female sexual subjectivities that are powerful and just for them. Singer-songwriter, here's the use of the word. Janelle Monáe tells Rolling Stone, being a queer Black woman in America, someone who has been in relationships with both men and women, I consider myself to be a free-ass motherfucker. So there's that flip of the word and that claiming of it as this powerful force. Fabiana Rodriguez, right? This great radical cultural activist through her art, shows the earth here as the mother, I would say, as this vulva, saying, respect where you come from, rather what Tracy Chapman was saying. Don't frack with me. And I think those lightning bolts, if you know symbolism, actually often signify what's understood as masculine energy. So in some ways, this is a very complex image of gender total inclusiveness, while also having the earth speaking, of course. Calling Earth Mother, I would say, affirms intelligence, autonomy, self-direction, and purposefulness of nature, while also disrupting and departing from heteropatriarchal sex and gender binaries. The mother names the cosmic universal mother beyond white supremacist and heteropatriarchal characterization. There was just an article in the New York Times, a mother, and they had to put it in quotes, is mourned by the queer New Yorkers left behind. Cecilia Gentili, who was an Argentinian immigrant who started as like an impoverished sex worker, but became this community activist and spoken word artist and organizer and much beloved. And they actually had her funeral in St. Patrick's Cathedral. And the priest did not know that she was trans, and they allowed it. And now they're like all outraged when they found out that they had had a funeral for a trans woman at St. Patrick's Cathedral. But anyway, or if you've seen Pose, the show, or we've seen the movie Paris is Burning, you know that in queer, particularly Black and Latino communities, the mother is often a femme or a trans woman who is the leader, the organizer, the one who nurtures and cares for a group of others. So I'll just bring in a little bit more art. I'm almost done if I'm going on. I'm not that long, but John Thomas Biggers, do you know this artist? John Thomas Biggers was an African-American man who painted mostly in the 50s and 60s and was a professor in Texas of art. But he made this great mural, The Web of Light, and he includes the Earth Mother. See her here? And look at that look on her face. He said what he wanted, what Biggers was doing, there he is. He went to Africa in 1950s, seeking what he Mame, which is a word in Akan, which is a language group in Ghana, for the Great Mother, the maternal spirit in all things, which he found everywhere in Ghana, in the shrine stores, in the countryside, in the women themselves, and in the music. And he gravitated particularly to the Fanti and Ashanti people and their belief in male and female entities of God. And so he drew Mother Nature, really calling upon this. And you can see it because here she is, a nursing mother, but around her is the golden rays symbolizing the trickster god, Anansi, who is understood as a male god. So she's sort of fusing all these elements together into the earth parent. And look at her face. When you first started, you look at sketches for the Earth Mother, and it's a typical Madonna and child, and she's holding the child and looking down beatifically at the child. But by the time he did the artwork, look how angry she looks. And in some ways, Biggers in 1960 drawing this is anticipating Afrofuturism, ecofeminism, eco-womanism, and like the recognition that this kind of violation of the Earth Mother and the anger and discontent of the Earth Mother, really quite astonishing in this mural. One other painting, more contemporary, by an African-American man who used to be a cop in Newark and then became an artist. But this gallery in New York City said, the gallery is going to be demolished in August. So in May or something, everybody has a week to make an artwork about the Earth Mother Goddess. And then in 2 weeks, at the end of August, all the artworks in the building will be destroyed, really speaking to the destruction of the planet that's happening right now. So he did this extraordinary mural, and you can see there's so much going on. He has the KKK here, the Republican National Committee, Monsanto, we see Mike Brown, the poison tree of life that you see. And here's the Earth Mother, who is really somewhat robotic, who has testicles as well as breasts, and she's in this sphere or bubble. And I interviewed him, and he said he wanted to challenge gender role stereotypes. She is Earth Mother and Father, adjusting to the depletion of the Earth by both environment and social destruction. She's morphing into something new as a way of protecting what is good. So she has to be both caring and brutal. She is being fertilized by her desire to endure. So the Earth Mother herself, it's not the Anthropocene where man is changing the earth and causing irreparable damage. But in some way, you have to recognize the agency of the earth in like moving away from us in some ways. And Rachel Carson in 1964 said, instead of always trying to impose our will on nature, we should sometimes be quiet and listen to what she has to tell us. So what is Earth telling us? What is land telling us? Berta Cáceres, assassinated about less than a year after making the speech when she won the Goldman Prize, the great Honduran Lenca activist. We must shake our conscience free of the rapacious capitalism, racism, and patriarchy that will only assure our self-destruction. The Gualcarque River has called on us, as have other gravely threatened rivers. We must answer their call. Our Mother Earth, militarized, fenced in, poisoned, a place where basic rights are systematically violated, demands that we take action. She hears the mother, right? And she took action. Mother Earth is not a metaphor for Berta Cáceres. And here is another Indigenous thinker, Tasha Spillett, saying, one might consider climate change. If we see the Earth as alive, if we see the Earth as having agency, right? If we're outside of this view of the Earth as dead machine for man to manipulate, one might consider climate disaster as land's denial of consent to resource extraction projects or the assault of other harmful relationships it is forced into. What happens when land refuses to reconcile with the human world? So what I would ask us is to just try and get out of that Western mindset that man is controlling everything and look to the agency of the earth and also say, as Marvin Gaye would say, what's going on, right? What really is going on? And this is the poem that really inspired me and that also gives me hope. This is Mary Lou Awiakta. I'm closing with this. And she is a Cherokee and Appalachian writer. And she put this poem first in Selu, seeking the Corn Mother's wisdom. Selu is the Cherokee Corn Mother. When earth becomes an it, when the people call earth mother, they take with love and with love give back so that all may live. When the people call earth it, they use her, consume her strength, then the people die. Already the sun is hot, out of season. Our mother's breast is going dry. She is taking all green into her heart and will not turn back until we call her by her name. So what is that green is the life force source, right? That she's taking into her heart, and she's leaving us. She's refusing consent, right? In what these artists and poets are perceiving. They're in some way, they're perceiving on another level what's going on. And I know this doesn't answer everything, right? But I would ask us in our work for environmental justice that we take into account this spiritual dimension of understanding, and certainly this organic understanding that the earth is alive and that the earth has fates of her own. The earth is responding to this, and that part of what we need to do is not just listen to the earth. I think we've sort of really moved away from that quite a bit, but really do start listening. But also we have to call her back. We have to call the mother, and we have to do that by really knowing deeply her name and knowing also that we are Mother Earth. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you all for your attention.
Okay, wow. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pose a few questions. We're going to have a conversation. Conversation with Jane with a couple of questions. But what we really want to do is have conversation amongst us all. So I'm going to kind of kick it off with 2 or 3 questions for us to engage in, and then feel free to then indicate that you'd like to say something or add to the conversation, either with a comment or question for Jane. And I believe there is a microphone that should be around for you all at that point in time. So, wow, there are a couple of images that are really disturbing, especially the one about the drilling. Yeah, that was pretty rough. Yeah, and the drill baby drill thing, right? So. All right, so there's so many things, Jane, that I would like to put out there, so many things for this conversation, which is why I'm glad I have another day with Jane to keep talking about some of these things. But one of which is, well, I want to kind of start with the ending, but let me instead go back to the beginning here. I want to talk a little bit about your own trajectory, because you began your work talking about sex crimes, and your first book is about sex crimes. So a lot of your early work was about violence against women. And in fact, I think in the blog that I sent out, I put a link to a video of Jane and I and another colleague of ours who's unfortunately deceased, so a law professor named Ann Scales, where we were being interviewed on a local PBS program on violence against women and how images perpetuate that. So that was something that's something that you've been thinking about for 30, 40 years, right? And even earlier, right? So then yeah, probably quite a bit earlier. But anyway, and then you combine that with your study of myths and mythologies and the great wisdom that comes in mythology. And one of my favorite books, and I highly recommend it, is her book on gossips, gorgons, and crones. And in that, you also talk about the power. You talk about power of mythology, the power of the women as quote unquote gossips, right? The idea of storytellers and sharing sort of knowledge, right? And putting our knowledge out there, and that sort of building community through storytelling and through knowledge. But also the power of the older woman, right? The power of the wise woman, the crone, right? And which itself is a very empowering depiction. So then a book that you did on extracting myths, and also I'm back on gossips, gorgons, and crones. You also tied that to nuclear power and the sort of the juxtaposition of that with nuclear power. And then, of course, now you end with calling upon the mother for this. So we've seen this trajectory that began with sort of depicting the violence, tying the violence to militarism and patriarchy, how it's reinforced, but then calling upon this ancient wisdom, the mythologies, who women were prior to the sort of patriarchy. You pointed out last night, patriarchy is really only 7,000 years old, right, compared to how much longer humans have been on Earth. But if you could just say something about that trajectory and the ways in which you've tied all these concepts together, and why your message today is so important.
Anyway, do the song if it's important. Is this on? Or do I turn it on? Maybe I just had to do that. Yeah. Yeah, my first book, The Age of Sex Crime, was about serial sex killers. It was actually my dissertation because I started to notice how the Hillside Strangler, the Boston Strangler, Jack the Ripper, they had become these kind of folk heroes, right? Outlaw heroes. They had really taken up, and I'm writing this in 1981 or something, this huge space in American popular culture, which now has only grown and grown and grown and grown. But I ended it by thinking about, it was a lot about Jack the Ripper. And I mentioned the film Dr. Strangelove, 1963. Have any of you seen it? You know, Stanley Kubrick. I don't know if younger generations have seen it, but
you should.
It's really extraordinary, and
it's one of those films you're gonna.
Yeah, it's a satire about the nuclear arms race and this whole absurdity of mutually assured destruction, which was the policy. Well, if Russians build a bunch, or the Soviets build a bunch of missiles, we have to build as many, and we each continue to grow the power to destroy, but as long as we both have equal power to destroy, nobody will do it. Well, anyway, and it was appropriately called MAD, right? I mean, we still have it, but of course it doesn't take into account meltdowns or accidents that can happen. But so anyway, in the film, this madman general who's obsessed with conspiracy theory and his own sexual impotence, he sets off nuclear destruction that destroys the entire world. And his name is General Jack D. Ripper. And it sounds like just a joke, but what Jack the Ripper did, he didn't rape anybody. He targeted the most vulnerable women, sex workers, and slit their throats and then mutilated their sex organs, including stealing the uterus and probably the vulva. You know, they say the uterus to be euphemistic, from a victim. And they'd leave their bodies out in the street, leaving this as like a sign of that hideous misogyny. But I think also, you know, this was the industrial era. I think why this has become so famous is it's a ritual acting out, not only that misogyny, but that violence against the source of life.
And then how does Dr. Strangelove end?
Well, the world ends.
No, but the scene, the description of the scene where the bomb is being released and Slim Pickens.
Oh, yeah, Slim Pickens playing like the Texas cowboy. Yeah.
Riding the bomb. It's shaped in a very phallic way, right?
Like it's some kind of orgasm.
Yeah, as he's riding with the bomb for the destruction of here. So like the symbolism of that's very...
Yeah, so I really started looking at these connections, including in this sort of 20th century invention, or late 19th, of this serial sex killer and the elevation of that killer to this kind of cult figure and what it had to say about the environment. And then when I moved to New Mexico, of course I had to write about nuclearism, right? But I found that for many indigenous feminist thinkers, the bomb, there was all this like nuclear, what I would call nuclear pornography, this sort of elevation and celebration of the bomb as either God or as ultimate phallic symbol. But from a lot of indigenous thinkers, the bomb was actually female because it had so much power. And like I had to really wrap my mind around that. And you know, many indigenous feminist thinkers like Paula Gunn Allen and Mary Luawiakta as well saw it as like a recognition of like the cosmic powers of the universe. And again, that ultimate warning of don't F with them, right? So that trajectory went on. And then I had another book just about popular culture, but then Call Your Mother. So I have really been thinking about this. And I was raised in a very Catholic, well, my mother really wasn't, but my father really was. My mother sort of went along with it. But, you know, I was imbued Catholic school all the way up through college, right? My father would say, what good did it do? And I'd say it made me a total rebel, right? And, but it also taught me, like, maybe through the Virgin Mary, you know, as this, you know, like Guadalupe can be and stuff, of like that there was this symbolism of this kind of power that was not the patriarchal power that I really felt. So I know not everybody feels that, but that was my entryway into.
So I'm still really, I can't get past your image of Janelle Monáe. Because in that quote that you have here, she's claiming herself as an MF, right? And you describe that as an example of being something good where she's claiming this. But I can't get past wondering, is that a claim of sort of, that is a claim of sort of a, is it possible that it isn't the sort of the claim, the claiming of the power, but in fact it's like saying, yeah, I'm an MF too.
No.
And I can be just as domineering or dominating as what?
No.
What?
She's not saying I rule. She's saying I'm free. And like in the book, what I do with that is that the mother fucker, as she's using it, is the mother who fucks. Like in that sense of not domination and violation, but in terms of like the erotic, what Audre Lorde would call the erotic, or, you know, that celebration of carnality that is also, you know, whole matter as being holy, sexuality as holy, freedom. You know, Bell Hooks says, all of our freedom, I wish I had the quote right in front of me, but in order to understand human freedom, the earth has to be free. For humans to be free, the earth has to be free. And I think that's what she's getting at. Like, motherfucker really did shift. It evolved. It flipped the script, which is another saying actually from Black English, in which you bring out this whole other side. You know, it's not just the man fucking the mother. It's that the mother ultimately one who had ultimate power.
Yeah.
So I think it's implicit in the word.
Okay.
And I think that's what she's doing. It's really moving beyond that sort of sex as being something that men do to women, right? Or something like that. And she's claiming that kind of agency and that kind of power that comes with fully being sexually autonomous, right? That power that has been so denied and the power that comes from it.
So I want to ask you a question that maybe people have thought about it, maybe not. I'm dying to get, how many of you have watched True Detective?
True Detective, Night Country, Jodie Foster and Kaylee Rice.
Okay, so
nobody.
So all right, well, I want to talk about it, and there's going to be some spoiler in it. Yeah,
it's profoundly ecofeminist and powerful.
Oh my God, yeah. So I actually stayed on late, making sure I watched the final episode of it. I'll tell you about it in a second here, but I want to ask you this question. So one of the things I love about you, you did this in did this in a class last night too. You've always done this, right? You're always giving credit to other people's work. You're always citing, and one could put together a very extensive bibliography just listening to you talk, right? And certainly reading your books, right? Because you're so well read, and you're so good at really sort of synthesizing, right? All the different things that are out there. So you are a white woman with Irish descent.
Italian-Irish.
Italian. Oh, Italian. I didn't realize. Okay, so
Caputi.
well, Caputi, duh, yeah. So Italian-Irish, working class white woman here, talking about now middle class was your life as a professor.
And mixed class growing up.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
More
you
middle.
adopting a lot to on Indigenous women, not adopting, integrating, speaking about in the works of in the world of Indigenous women, some Latino women, and Black women. So, and yet you've also pointed out that some of these traditions are also of Indigenous people all over the world, right, globally,
Including Europe.
including Europe. So, say something about what it means for you as a white woman to be, and why it's, I guess maybe I know we've talked about this, why it's important that in a certain sense that we're all calling upon the mother, right? That this is knowledge and wisdom that we get if we listen, and why it's important for all of us to listen, and the ways in which you're listening and then conveying it is important to you, or how do you respond to any of that?
Yeah. I mean, I always wanted to be out of Western rationalism, like that kind of constraint on knowledge, right? And I always knew there was something more. And I could find it, like, particularly in the Irish tradition that I was, like, kind of given through oral tradition. Like, you know, my mother would always say, a little bird told me this. And, like, I took it as absolutely literal. Yes, the birds were speaking. And I even on occasion, heard something from a bird. Right. And I mean, this is all like it's just depicted as sort of nonsense, or that all of life is animated. There were fairies in every tree, etc. Those are like elemental knowledges that the earth is alive. Right.
Well, and I think that's why your work on mythology is so important, because you've gone back in so many cultures and brought out some of the deeply ancient mythologies and myths and mythic figures of women in so many cultures.
And it's so important, like whoever we are, that we attend to decolonizing knowledge, right? And like learning from all these traditions that have been what Toni Morrison calls discredited knowledge, right? That been discredited because people who generated the knowledge have been systematically discredited under white and male supremacy, colonization, etc. So I think if we want to be educated, I think it's, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, if all you're doing is quoting like the European tradition and like looking to like French philosophers and all that kind of stuff, to me, that's problematic. Right? Isn't it? I mean, it looks like normal academic discourse, right? But, like, it's racist if that's all you turn to for knowledge. And like, you know, you let, like, and also that you separate like this kind of, you know, Greg Cajete, who is an educator, he's a professor of education and native studies at UNM. He wrote a book called Native Science. And, you know, Indigenous knowledge is often like seen as sort of woo-woo or spirituality only. He calls it science, and he's right. Or like Linda Tawahi Smith, who says Mother Earth is not some mystical notion. It has a spiritual component, but it's a scientific, practical understanding of how life works. And so I really want to get to that too.
Yeah. Well, I think that challenge to sort of science, that there's even a popular TV scientist whose name I won't say, who is very dismissive of a lot of these sort of kinds of ways of knowledge, and yet he's very popular. You see him, you know, all the time, and I've heard him be very, very rational in his dismissiveness of this kind of ancient knowledge. And so part of what you do then is bring that knowledge forth.
Yeah. I mean, you have to do it, like, obviously.
Or help bring it forth.
Help bring it forth, or, you know, and of course it's a lot of hard work, like, to do that. And you have to, like, consult a lot of people and learn a lot. I mean, do you read Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, right? You know, she's a PhD plant biologist, and she also brings in Indigenous from her Potawatomi tradition. And it's really extraordinary, good place to start to look at how to, like, she's the braiding of the sweetgrass, the braiding of the knowledge traditions. It's not to say that Western knowledge is useless or has nothing, but it has been used for colonizing purposes. It has deliberately left some things out. So it needs to be greened, in that whole sense of greening that Awiakta is talking about, the greening as the life force and like bringing in all the dimensions of the aliveness of all.
Well, you ended by talking about, man thinks he can control everything. And so many of your images were about that, right? And we know that that's part of sort of Western rationality, right? That we can create all these things to control. And yet you're saying instead we need to recognize the agency of Mother Earth. We need to take into account this spiritual understanding that Earth is alive, and we have to call her back. We are Mother Earth, right?
Yeah.
So
I will say spiritual material understanding. I should correct myself on that. Yeah.
So now to True Detective.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry no one here has seen it yet, right? I'm sorry. I'm going to do a little bit of a spoiler alert here. So we're going to tell you probably more than what you'd want to know if you're just starting out watching it, but hopefully this will still make you want to watch it. Unfortunately, it's one of those things that if you have HBO, you have the opportunity to be able to see it, or maybe you have a friend who watches HBO or can share their link to you. But anyway, there's been this series. There's 4 seasons of it. I think the first season was many years ago. The 4th season just came out a few months back, but it stars Jodie Foster. And what is the other woman's name? We were just talking about her this morning.
Kylie Rice. I'm not probably saying it correctly.
Who is part came from the Cayman Islands and part Indigenous woman. I'm not remembering. I should have gotten this.
We should have written it down.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. But anyway, it takes place in Alaska. And so it starts out with these men, most of them white, but all men that are found murdered, or they're found frozen. I should say they're found frozen out in the
naked and in a tangle
in the tundra, right? So this is like the 6 episodes of finding out what happens, right? Of the discovery of what happens, and Jodie Foster and her character and the character of this other detective spend their time really, really trying to find out who they are. But the ending is so powerful in terms of exactly what you just said, because what they're up against, what you find out that they're up against, is this effort on the part of the scientists to control nature. But as they're attempting to control nature, they're unleashing this incredibly destructive force that is resulting in a number of stillbirths, cancers, and in poisoning of the indigenous population in this town. And so when you get to the end, what we get at the end is exactly, Jane, what you're saying is all about, right? It's against the forces to attempting to control nature and the retrieval of the power of the agency of the indigenous women, who then take matters into their own hands. You find out, right, at the end. So it's incredible. I'm not even doing it justice in how I'm describing it. But what I want you to address, though, Jane, is, since you're such a student of popular culture and images, how you sort of analyze this whole series, and particularly the final episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to analyze it when nobody else has seen it, because I acknowledge that. We'll have to come back next year.
Yeah,
say, we're all watch True Detective Night Country and figure it out. But I do recommend it. It's not perfect. It's also written and directed by Isa Lopez.
So this is very important. She's Mexican.
She's Mexican,
yeah.
And she really is trying to get us to understand that, like, at one point, it's very clear that there is what we call a supernatural, which is really natural, right? It's like the earth is speaking. Ancestors can communicate with us. Like, many cultures have recognized that as nature. Western calls it supernatural, right? But anyway, I think popular culture is it's a conduit. It's a repository of, certainly for ancient and contemporary mythologies and new narratives being told. Fabiana Rodriguez, who I put in there, when we looked at some of her images, she has a great piece on being a cultural worker and how we have to take the mic back from and really foreground the works of artists of color and really generate new narratives. that this is such an important part of our activism. It's not the only thing we're doing, but it is really important. Has anybody ever seen that anthology, All We Can Save, on climate? It's on climate activists, women, particularly women climate activists. There's a great article by Rodriguez in there, Fabiana. And I think that it's cultural activism, this particular show. And again, it's not the only thing we can do. We also have to be like lobbying, demonstrating, informing. We have to do all those things. But having new stories and new symbols and about what's going on is, I think, also extremely important. I know that woke me up when I was a kid. Think back to how you formed your consciousness, right? And what things particularly set you off in different directions, whether it be symbolic kind of things that spoke to you, because rationalism isn't all there is. Like, we need symbols and stories to express things that words simply won't do it.
So rationalism isn't the only thing there is. So you're not dismissing.
I'm not.
Rationalism.
It's not the only thing there is. Mm-hmm. It's not the only way to knowledge. That's why land is epistemology has to be challenged.
Yeah.
The typical epistemology, or what Francis Bacon said, is the way you know something is you cut it up and you torture it, right? No, right? That's a problem. That's an epistemological problem, right?
Yeah.
Problematic way of.
Well, which is why when I cited you with your last statements there, you said, "Let me add material."
Yeah, because we can't just see, it. Like, all of life has an energetic, what Gloria Anzaldúa would say, what we call in English spirit, is really energy, right? That there is all this energy connecting us because we are all part of this ecosystem, or we are all part of Mother Earth. So, and we know that a lot of oppression takes place energetically, right? What was I just... like when somebody dumps on somebody, right? They load their negative affect into you. Teresa Brennan theorizes that. You break, part of slavery, what Dolores Williams says is similar between the treatment of enslaved women and the treatment of the earth, is that it was also spirit breaking, right? That you really have to break. And rape was a primary way of breaking someone's spirit. And so you have to destroy what we think of as their energy or their spirit at the same time. And stories can also nourish energy and spirit by telling the story the other way. So when I say spiritual, I always want to say material, because it's real. It's not something unearthly. It's actually very earthy. It's earth energy.
Yeah.
Does that just sound too woo-woo?
Well, no, in fact, get ready for your comments or questions. And Sam's in the back with the microphone, so you just have to... I'm going to ask sort of another kind of question here that jumps off of what you were just saying. What are the implications for activism? And you put up on the screen, for example, the website or the link, which obviously you couldn't hook to, but I can tell you where you can go to a great city's website and just search under 30 years of environmental justice. But we hosted an event with the women from the first People of Color Leadership Summit in 1991 in D.C. So it was these very, very powerful women, right? It was people of color, so it was Chicanas, Latinas, Indigenous women, and African American women talking about environmental justice. So there are people who have been activists. You mentioned the compañera from Nicaragua, for example, and there are
Honduras,
Honduras, from Honduras. So there are all these folks who are really working hard. There are various activists who are working very hard on these issues, and you gave us some of the images that they're using to counter to some of these efforts and to construct their activism. And there's people even here on campus doing things like pushing for water reuse, right, and protection of our Great Lakes and so on. So what are the implications of what you're sharing, not only for us and how we might shift how we maybe think about things and language what we might use, but also just for potential and activism? What thoughts do you have on that?
I guess as an we were talking about this in your class. All of us have different gifts. All of us have different capacities in the society, and actions through which we work. No one is necessarily the only one or better than the others, right? But we all have to, it really is a composition that we're all making to change the world for the better. So I guess I just see it as my part of it is really associated with the cosmovision or the worldview. That's what speaks to me, the story, the narrative, the myth, the symbol. That also is really another way of saying what's going on. But all of these actions are it really has to be a composition, a quilt or whatever we want to call it, of a coming together. But that cultural, what Caroline Merchant is saying is that in the mid, like 15th, 16th century in Europe, the worldview changed. And yes, there had been environmental depredation before, but nothing like what came since, because the worldview changed, because the earth was no longer seen as organic and alive, and the earth was seen as an object and a machine. And when they convinced everybody of that, practices changed. Mining, previously in Europe, miners could go down just like a little bit, right? And they could get some metals. But when they came back up, they had to be purified for 3 days, and they had to apologize for the violation of the earth. Think about what there is now, right? I mean, so worldview is really, really important. And, Caceres starts out saying, in our cosmovision, right? The river is alive and is protected by the spirits of young girls who are calling to us. Well, yeah, she hears them. And Western rationalism would dismiss that as just fantasy. But it's not fantasy to say we're the God species, it's not complete hooey. But who gets told what's hooey? But anyway, you follow me. So yeah. I think we need everything that all of us do, right? Yeah. And that our passion and that we love what we do. And, so many of your students are going into green buildings and, planning and all of that. And that's just as important. But, so I would just say that as an educator or a writer, I see myself as hopefully contributing some to that worldview part.
How we should shift the worldview. Any comments or questions from here? Because I can keep going, but I'd like to, just anything you want to add, any thoughts that you have. How does this relate to some of the conversations that you're having around the Anthropocene, for example, in the Anthropocene lab? Anyone?
I'll ask something. I don't think they need.
It's for the taping, thank you.
Okay. Well, the first thing will just be a comment to maybe update your song from Tracy Chapman. I don't know if you know the young woman from Chicago rapper. Her name is No Name.
No, I don't.
Okay, so she has a song called Rainforest. It's pretty recent, I think maybe 2 or 3 years. She has a very recent album called Sundial, I think came out over the summer. But Rainforest is a song generally about the rape of the earth.
Oh, so, great.
And it's
No Name?
No Name, yeah, all one pushed together.
Thank you very much.
There's that. So then the question would be, so I teach a class on the Anthropocene here at UIC for honors students. And in the first part of the class, we read several essays from Dipesh Chakrabarty.
Yeah.
Who's been recently thinking a lot about questions that you're raising too. One of his essays is titled something like The Planet, an Emerging Humanist Category, I think.
What was the last word?
An emerging humanist category,
okay.
I think is. But the idea of the essay is that Chakrabarty basically distinguishes between 4 different terms: planet, earth, world, and globe. And for him, it's planet that is ultimately the thing, the category that will help us all to be politically active. And the reason is because the planet doesn't care about us. All of those other categories are, as he says, I think, oriented to the human. But the planet is not. It's not the earth in the sense that you're describing, like bacon. It's not like an inanimate object. He does all of that too. The planet is something like an early quotation that you showed. I don't remember who it was from, but it's something like honoring the limits of the earth. As you, I'm sure, well aware, like the T-shirt that you showed was interesting because like the two guys with the fossil fuel people. Yeah. They were both wearing like Nazi shirts, right? One had a swastika, one has but of course we know that it's like not the Nazis that are doing all of that, right? Not necessarily.
No, it isn't.
Right, exactly.
Like the titans of industry, yeah.
Yeah, right. So in the mid-20th century, as you well know, it was like, well, we could choose between capitalism and communism, right? But neither of those figured out the limits of the Earth itself, right? I mean, nobody knew that, really, in terms of the limits, the limitations, planetary boundaries, Earth system science. We just didn't have it. So because the Earth is so central to your thinking, where's the planet? Like, in other words, because of the genderedness of Mother Earth, and because of the way in which you try to think through, domination and the questions about Janelle Monáe and all of that, right? It's like, wow, I don't know. Is there a place for the planet where perhaps gender quite literally can't even figure?
Yeah, and not see, that there might be still some human centrism in like talking about Mother Earth.
Precisely.
Too much of...
Yeah, precisely.
Right.
And as you know, it's like with the Anthropocene, it's like 10,000 years of humans, but like 4.5 billion of Earth. And here we are. It's like, oh, humans.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, when do we get back to the planet? Which is like 4.5 billion years without us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with that. And that the planet is not human, right? The planet, we are part of the planet, and humans are only a small part, time-bound, etc. So yes, I mean, I think that's all well and good. I mean, I really am not opposed to that at all. I think I also want to recognize like this global symbolic figure. I mean, this naming of Earth as mother. Mothers are also not only human, right? I mean, unfortunately, most of the depictions of Mother Earth show the Earth as human. I found some like Owl Earth Mother and various others, but not really. So I would want to get past that species centrism, definitely. But I guess I'm also trying to activate the emotions, and emotions are very powerful, and they're not to be just seen as like the antithesis to intelligence and all that. And that our bodies, or like even that capacity of mothering, which is different, mammals, are different than others. But our bodies, like if we learn from the land, we also learn from like these processes as really reflecting greater realities. So I'm fine with the planet. It just seems a little too removed for me. And it may really work for some people. I don't think we just need one way. This is not a fundamentalist proposition that I'm giving at all, right? It's just one way that has worked, and that certainly is this global tradition that I want to learn from. And I don't want to correct it necessarily, right? I just want to really speak with it. And
listen to it.
I listen. And so the planet, if it works for many, great. I completely. But I want to use, I guess, Mother Earth too, just because too much of the discourse of the Anthropocene leaves out completely the gender and sexualized parts of it, right? I mean, motivations and effects of it. And so I'm going to keep calling that out. So Mother Earth works better for me for that. But I'm not right, and that's not wrong either.
More comments, questions? How does this resonate with some of what you're teaching or thinking about?
Or what do you really dislike about this or disagree with, or...
Homer.
Thank you so much. I am very curious about your trajectory is really fascinating, and I wanted to ask you, looking at sexual violence to violence against the planet, and I was wondering. I mean, I often think about, in order to get to a moment of justice, to actually do this kind of environmental justice work. one of the things that I'm really passionate about, I'm an archaeologist and an architectural historian, and one thing that I'm passionate about is the forensics. Documenting, being the witness to this violence. And I was wondering if you could, because I mean that's an interesting parallel to me, looking at a kind of a violence against a human being and violence against an element of landscape, a river, a lake, a particular place, which is full of cultural meanings and feelings and emotions and histories, indigenous knowledges attached to it. And a miner comes and there's a kind of there's this breakdown moment. And to me, a really responsible thing to do is to document that, as it maybe that's a kind of a methodology. This comes from the kind of rational methodologies of European history, but as something I was wondering if you could talk about the forensics as part of, because you're activating people, you're inviting people to do something, and calling something, if that kind of forensic work is important to you.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this use of forensics that way. So forensics just means documenting and really getting the...
I'm thinking there's a murder, so in order to you go to
Gotcha.
Site of crime.
Right.
You go to the site of
So it's a crime scene investigation.
Crime scene investigation, that's what I'm referring to.
Absolutely.
And I'm interested in crime scene investigation in a place where there's a coal mine.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I think you would really, really appreciate this book or this report, Violence on the Land, Violence on Our Bodies, which was Indigenous generated. A lot of it takes place in Canada as well as North America, where it is doing exactly that. It is really going to different sites and really talking and developing new concepts like land trauma, and like how the land is experiencing the trauma that then the people feel, and then environmental violence, and really documenting the ways that violence against women, girls, two-spirit, queer youth go up in all these extractive areas. So and there's like a group in Africa that is doing the same thing and really finding that in these extractive zones, but they see, and again, it's really difficult to talk about like what is the parallel between like fracking, which is, or like extracting deep in the earth, and like that kind of those, it's just even like the model of what is being done to the earth that is so much like sexual violation, like fracking, drilling down, releasing toxic chemicals, opening up the, it's just, and then
causing the earth to quake.
Yeah, causing the earth to quake, yeah. And so anyway, I think that is really important, like you're saying, to do. I mean, the earth is unfortunately a kind of crime scene right now, right? Which is kind of what I guess I was getting at with Jack the Ripper, right? We left these right out in the street. This is the crime, and it is the crime that's happening now. And Tracy Chapman names it that way too, and says we have to testify. We have to do. So I think that's a really fruitful line of inquiry to look at it that way, and then all the kind of things that go along with that. So I agree.
Well, and it takes me back to that really disturbing image that we saw earlier, right, with the fracking, the drilling, right, with the body of the woman, and it is true. Just to highlight it again, what you said, right, the amount of rape, for example, that occurs in areas where these extractive industries
rape,
intensify,
sex trafficking,
right?
domestic violence,
and straight up murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where and one of the things that's also interesting about the ending of that True Detective, right? This concept that, back to your notion of forensics, right? How many of these murders not only never get solved, but never even get investigated,
right?
And so the prevalence, right, of the sort of, so that juxtaposition.
No, it's true.
The juxtaposition of the violence against the woman with the violence against the earth via things like fracking is more than just an epistemological connection, right? It actually
It's a literal
acts
right.
of violence that are playing out that have these huge repercussions for life, not only the lives of these women and their communities, right, but the life of Earth, right?
Right.
So what we're doing with this fracking.
Right. And like that kind of.
But yet, and this other part I wanted to add, it's so intimately tied to, but we need it because we need to be self-sufficient in oil production, because we can't get along with the rest of the world. So we got to produce our own oil. Never mind most of what is comes out of these fracking locations. These what's the word? Are actually, that's all being exported. The majority of it's being exported. It's not even being used for domestic use. Mm. But yet somehow we've justified it in economic terms. We've justified it that we need it. It's part of, again, that jobs environment kind of, juxtaposition always. And there's that control over nature. We need to do it. And if this is the byproduct of that, it's sort of meant to be accepted. And that's part of why I think these images become so embedded in the popular culture, because it's something we have to accept in order to get these other benefits, right? Which is something I think you also mentioned in some of your other images and slides that you showed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. This show that none of you have seen is like a crime scene investigation too. And it is also really this mine that is destroying the land base up there and poisoning everybody. Yeah. And the death of a murdered Indigenous woman activist. Yeah. So, yeah. So you got to watch it. I don't know. Yeah. Thank you.
Did you have a question?
No, I'm going to ask.
Oh, about the end of it? Well, we don't want to give too much of a...
Yeah, no, those are private.
Yeah. Yeah, you really do. You really... Well, you were going to ask about it. You saw it.
Oh, yeah. We have to...
Yeah, we don't want to tell you, like, too much, right? But it really...
It's not completely clear. It's mysterious.
So, Jane, in my class last night, for one thing, I really got to give a shout-out to the students from that class. The conversation was just amazing, and Abigail Davis in particular has some questions for us that we really talked through. But one of the things in addressing some of the things that came out, we talked about this notion of woman, right, and feminine spirit, and right, and sort of avoiding any kind of essentialist debates or notions here. Though you did talk about, I think it was, the older I get, the worse I'm getting on names, but I don't remember if it was Mary Daly. Somebody had 4 notions of what it...
Oh, no, not Mary Daly. Rena Swensel.
Who
is an architect and a philosopher. She's dead now. She died about 5 or 6 years ago.
A big difference there, yeah.
From what's in the English name is Santa Clara Pueblo in New Mexico. And she says that in the language of, this is a Tewa group, a language group. The Pueblos along the Rio Grande have 3 different language groups. The word for earth, there's a word Gia, and Gia means mother, but it has 4 meanings. So 1 is a biological mother. 2 is the earth. 3 is anyone in the community who loves, helps, creates community, cares, brings everybody together, leads, all those kind of things. And the 4th one is a class of energetic spirit beings who are very powerful. So in that one word, right? I mean, we have mother and we have like not only all these sexist stereotypes around it, but, we don't really expand it into like, what are these capacities that womanism does this, if you're familiar with womanism and African-American feminist thought of like this mothering power, that again, there is that, and we have to give all due respect and honor to those. I'm not a mother in that sense. I did not biologically birth and raise children, right? So there is something very powerful about that, without which the world would not continue. And but there's also all of us mother. Like, what if mothering was like our model for being like activists, right? I mean, there's a book called Revolutionary Mothering edited by Alexis Pauline Gumm and others, that I really would recommend to you, where a bunch of, mostly I think queer women of color talk about mothering and revolutionary mothering and just the job of raising the next generation and how powerful that is. But also, there are other mothers. You don't have to necessarily be the biological mother. Calling about all of us to mother.
Yeah.
And I think that is... I think it's misogyny that has not allowed mothering to be understood that way, as that powerful force.
And that is a good way to begin our wrap up here, right? This idea of the power of sort of mothering, because embedded in one of those, and actually I guess all four of those, but in one of those concepts is this idea of caring,
Yeah.
right? The idea of nurturing, which is creating community, which are things we really don't do typically in this sort of Western dominated, especially in this particular, within this economic system, right? That there isn't that care. We don't embrace sort of love and community. We don't necessarily nurture it, but that is, in a sense, what you're asking us to do when you ask us to call upon the mother.
Yeah. No, it's true. And valorize those traits, right?
Yeah.
As really human, right?
Yeah.
That all humans should be doing.
But I think you take it even further to say that if we don't, or to do so really is a matter of our very survival, that our survival is what's at stake here. So even as we're trying to reshape Chicago, right, city of big shoulders, what did you say?
I read Teresa's editorial, and she invokes the city of big shoulders. And I said, that was like the industrial past, right? That's what it means, all the manufacturing that went on here. And it is, of course, a very masculine image. And I said, what if we had this, as we're trying to green the city and stuff, the city of big breasts? And like, I was like kind of kidding, but I'm not really, like, because the breasts would be the symbol of nurturing. Not, again, you don't have to have, milk producing breasts to do it, but like, it wouldn't be, because women's bodies have been so turned into pornography. It would just be a joke, right? Everybody would snicker and like think of big titty, porn or something like that, right? But what if like they got rid of the misogyny and stuff, and you really were talking about greening the city, and it was based on that model, not of big shoulders, but of
as nurturance, right? I love as caring, as protecting, right? And
community building,
ensuring our survival. And then I quickly made reference to the couple of mountains in southern Colorado, right? And that the Comanches and the Apache refer to as the Oaxatoyas, and you talked about sort of as mountains, all mountains really.
Many mountains. No, some mountains are masculine. A lot of mountains are seen as breast symbols. But anyway, or a lot of us would say we don't want big shoulders or big breasts. We want to be gender free. And, I certainly respect that as well. But I would say as like a symbolic intervention to call Chicago the city of big breasts for a while. And to make people think about what that meant would be a good.
And on that note, we still have some refreshments. There are books in the back of the rooms. We encourage you to purchase one of her books. Did you have a question? Oh no, let's get another comment question.
Sorry, I got here late, so I don't know if this was. I think it kind of goes off of what you were just talking about, but I think and also thinking about this concept of Mother Earth, right, which we probably already mentioned came out of indigenous cultures here in the Americas, right, and but it's also when you look at who's been the highest number of EJ activists and leadership has also often been women, right, and then that same thing around the violence, and we've had so many women, thinking about Latin America in particular, where to be a woman EJ activist has often been a death sentence, right, and like Berta Cáceres in Honduras and many others. I work for EJ organization here in Little Village, and my boss has often said if I was doing this work in Latin America, I'd probably already be dead, right? And so I think it's interesting to think about Mother Earth, and also then who's protecting that Mother Earth most disproportionately, I guess, is also been mothers themselves and women. So I just think it was interesting to make that distinction. It's often been men then who've attacked those women for what they've been doing to fight back, and then those same men who are then, like you said, pillaging and raping the earth for economic profits, right? So I just thought making that connection between the mother and who's been our EJ leadership for so long, right? Most of our EJ, our initial, people who we talk about as like the EJ leaders, even in the U.S., has also been just predominantly women as well. So I just thought that was an interesting point.
It's true. Thank you.
Powerful point to end on, and viva la mamá,
la madre tierra,
la mamá de la tierra. All right, with that, I want to thank Jane Caputi for being here. This is so awesome. Yeah, very much. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
And thanks to everybody who sponsored.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, cool. Well, there's still refreshments out there, and there's still books to be bought.